All right, we're going to talk about this interview between Mark Levin and Joe Kent. We're going to talk about who each guy is. Now, you guys kind of know on the surface who they are, but I think you think of Mark Levin as a radio host. Let me explain to you who Mark Levin is. Mark Levin, before he was a broadcaster, was a lawyer. He was also the chief of staff for Edwin Meese under Ronald Reagan. Edwin Meese was one of the most influential advisors to President Reagan. I grew up really liking the guy, but Edwin Meese was involved in Iran-Contra, and Mark Levin is his chief of staff. You know Iran-Contra, when Israel sold weapons to Iran? So it is so rich to hear Mark Levin, he's going to dress down Joe Kent. When Mark Levin worked for the guy who helped facilitate illegal weapons deals to Iran. That's Mark Levin. Oh, and in case you were wondering, Mark Levin isn't into the Epstein files because Jeffrey Epstein was with Adnan Khashoggi and some of those guys helping the Iran-Contra deal along. So Mark Levin is the chief of staff to a guy who enabled Jeffrey Epstein. And now he's going to dress down Joe Kent. One last thing. Mark Levin is a never-Trumper.
As a result of what the Trump supporters have attempted here, I am not voting for Donald Trump. Period. These bully, dirty tricks, Nixonian tactics, they're only going to backfire. They're only going to backfire. So count me as never Trump.
There he is.
There's been too much of this, folks. Way too much of this. The crap in the National Enquirer against Ted Cruz. The attacks on Michelle Fields.
Attacks on Michelle Fields were totally fake. Corey Lewandowski did manhandle her a little bit, but Ben Shapiro blew that up to blow up Breitbart, ruined Breitbart, and started the Daily Wire. And Mark Levin helped him. This is his little lift for his buddy.
I mean, I can go right through the list. Too much. At some point, you got to stand up to it. At some point, you got to stand up to it. I do not like bullies, and I never have.
Mark suffers from self-loathing.
So I will not be voting for Donald Trump. And if they piss me off one more time, I'm going to urge millions and millions of you, should he get the nomination, not to vote for him either.
No one would listen to you.
I'm very serious about this.
No one cares.
Nobody cares about you.
Very serious about this.
Still don't care. So when people talk about never-Trumpers and neocons have taken over the administration, well, this is who we're talking about. So here we go. This is the Mark Levin Show. He says he's going to give the last hour to Joe Kent. He does 2 hours of, whatever. Then he runs down Joe Kent horribly for 20 minutes before he brings Joe Kent on for about 23 minutes. So that's Mark Levin's giving Joe Kent an hour. And let's go through it.
Joe Kent, I'd like to go through some of this with you and give you an opportunity to respond. We got Semaphore, we got Axios, we got the New York Post, we got on and on and on.
Axios is libs, Semaphore article sucked, the New York Post is an op for Israeli intelligence.
Saying that you were considered a leaker, we have the White House saying it. Were you a leaker? Are you under investigation? Do you know whether you're under investigation? Let's try and clear the air right at the beginning.
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I never leaked any classified information. And the stories you're reading are stories from leakers who are leaking, I guess, maybe an investigation about me being a leaker. So I think it's just a media counter-narrative. I had
so nobody has contacted you from Justice or the FBI or anything like that?
Nope.
The authorities never investigated Joe Kent for leaking. This was media garbage and other leakers from the White House who falsely put this on Joe Kent. Also, this ridiculous Rabbi Wolicki, whatever his name was in that text chat with Josh Hammer and other people. When Charlie Kirk said he's not giving in to Jewish donors, they live up to the stereotypes, he's not going to be bullied, and he left the movement. He says, I'm giving up on the Israel First movement. These idiots think they caught Joe Kent, and they didn't. And this is where this comes from.
That the way that those screenshots got to Candace is via Joe Kent. You see, this has never been made public before, Aaron. Right now on your show, I'm saying this. So let me explain. Andrew Colvett, who's was Charlie's number 2 guy, who now hosts the show. Andrew was in the chat group as well. He was one of the 9 people in the group.
9 people in the chat. So 9 people around Charlie Kirk would have kept this secret to hide what he really said. And you think Charlie was surrounded by people who were treating him well. Get real.
And he admitted at first. Be perfectly honest, at first he was denying it. We didn't know how Candace got them, but then he admitted on the air on his show,
straight out of this guy's mouth, Andrew Colvett lying again,
that he had given these text messages and he gave them to, he said that on the show that he gave them to someone in the government. He told us that he gave them to someone in the government. And of course the response of the people in the chat group was, you don't have a right to do that. This is a private chat group. There was no warrant. It doesn't work that way.
Yes, it does work that way. If you're involved in a chat, you have the right to show people the chat. Period. End of story. This man has serious control issues.
But nevertheless, he did it. So we didn't know how it got to her. And then we started putting pieces together. Because Joe Kent was someone that we knew that there was a relationship there between Charlie and Andrew and Joe. We knew that when Charlie would visit Washington, D.C., he would talk to Joe.
We knew that when Charlie would visit Washington, D.C., he would talk to Joe. This guy is admitting that they handled Charlie as a group and talked about him behind his back, about who he's talking to. That's what that means. They were handling Charlie like a Charlie Kirk project.
And we kind of put two and two together, and eventually, I'll leave out some of the details that I shouldn't say. We kind of verified that the messages had been given by Andrew to Joe Kent, and that Joe Kent had been the one to pass them on to Candace.
When he says we kind of verified, he didn't verify anything. Some lickspittle from D.C. ratted to them on Joe Kent. You know, a leaker. And so they got their stupid story. Mark Levin then carries this dog water, carries their water, and throws it on Joe Kent. And Joe Kent's like, no, dude, no one interviewed me. And it's over. And when you see all of our White House officials repeating this stupid leaker story, they all know it's made up. They all know it's a rumor, manufactured. Not one investigative official told them Joe Kent was being investigated. And that's pretty disturbing.
Did you ever leak confidential?
No,
Let me
never
do it
leaked.
this way. Did you ever leak classified information? You said no. Did you ever leak confidential
No.
information?
Nope.
Never.
Never.
Were you
No.
cut out? Okay, you're on the record. That's perfectly fine. And that's a good thing, Joe. Were you cut out of briefings for the last 3 months or so when you were there?
This is also a leak, and different advisors and their cronies have been leaking for a while that Kent and Tulsi are cut out of things. The fact is that they cut Joe Kent out of things and took it upon themselves to do so. The president never expressed his wishes that Joe Kent be cut out of anything. There is no evidence that President Donald Trump wanted Joe Kent cut out. Since Joe Kent's resignation, everyone has attacked him.
No, I wouldn't say it was cut out. I mean, the president can choose to have whoever he wants to have in the actual presidential Oval Intelligence sessions. I still had access to the PDB and was part of,
Tell everybody what that is.
That were appropriate for my job. The President's Daily Brief.
So you had access
Yeah,
to that right up to the end?
Yeah, until the day I walked out the door.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think the president said he never really remembers you that well, he never really met with you that often? Is that correct?
Well, the president meets with so many different people. I mean, he knew who I was, but by no means was I a primary advisor to him on a daily basis. However, in terms of determining the threat level that Iran posed to our country, I was a key part of that process. So that was very much in my purview.
And he rejected your view?
I don't think he rejected the view. I think he may have chosen to go a different direction, and I think the vast majority of intelligence and information that he received was given to him to paint a picture that Iran was on the cusp of developing a nuclear weapon, which just simply was not the truth. And also, as Secretary Rubio said, there was no imminent threat coming from Iran against the Americans.
Well, you know, he corrected that.
There was an imminent threat coming from the Israelis who were going to attack. But that's actually the truth.
Okay, hold on. We're going to do it. We're going to do it honestly, one point at a time.
Had observed, the Iranians had observed an escalation ladder. They hadn't attacked us under President Trump.
Can you do me a favor? And I don't mean to be rude. Can you talk a little more slowly? I'm having trouble hearing. Take your time. Go ahead.
Sure. When President Trump came into office, the Iranians knew that President Trump wanted to get a deal. They observed the escalatory ladder very carefully. They stopped having our proxies attack us like they were attacking us under the Biden administration. And they got to the negotiating table with us about the nuclear agenda. When the 12-day war kicked off and the Israelis started that, the Iranians still didn't attack us.
All right. We have to take a break. I'm going to circle back on some of your comments here, and then I have some other questions. I appreciate you being here.
Joe Kent moving in lockstep with Charlie Kirk at that time, when Charlie Kirk was alive. The Iranians just weren't doing anything, but Israel was really turning up the pressure, and Mark has to cut to a commercial. And then Mark says he's going to circle back, but he doesn't circle back to that.
Back with Joe Kent. We'll try and get through a number of issues as we can. I want to read you something, Joe, for you to respond to here. When one of President Trump's closest advisors, who's vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated and we're not allowed to ask any questions about it, it's a data point, you told Carlson. about the murder of our friend Charlie Kirk. It's a data point that we need to look into. What are you trying to look into there? What do you think happened there?
What I know is that there were foreign leads that we didn't get a chance to look into, that we did not thoroughly investigate. That's what I know.
You have any country in mind?
No, I think we need to fully investigate the potential of any foreign nexus.
So you think a foreign country may have been involved in his assassination. Does the FBI think that?
What I think is that we need to thoroughly investigate all the potentials. That's what needs to happen.
I know, but what I'm trying to find out, you're a smart guy. You're an accomplished guy. Is there something that piqued your interest that caused you to say, maybe there's something foreign and we need to look into this? I mean...
There is. I just can't get into it because it's classified and it's part of an ongoing investigation, I hope. But from my vantage point and from what I saw at the National Counterterrorism Center, that was not thoroughly looked into.
I'm not trying to be rude. Just slow down. I'm a little hard of hearing. Go ahead. What was that? I didn't hear you.
What I said was there were still potential foreign links and leads that we needed to look into. That's what I know. That's what I'm asserting.
So you're not asserting any particular country there?
The countries are China, France, and Israel. Those are the real big three that had forces messing around with the Charlie Kirk situation, pressuring people who are in orbit, putting people literally on the ground there, and having a very, very large stake in the assassination and removal of the obstacle that it was Charlie Kirk.
No, I'm not.
How about Butler? Do you think any foreign government was involved in the attempt to assassinate the president there?
We need to thoroughly investigate that, especially now that Thomas's Crook's online persona has been uncovered. That needs to be looked into as well.
Mm-hmm. You think it's Iran, maybe?
We should investigate to see if there's any linkage between Iran, but in particular in between the Iranian agent Asif Merchant, who was just convicted for plotting an assassination attempt against President Trump. That should be looked into to see if those two events are linked. That should definitely be looked into.
And
I think you'd agree on that, wouldn't you?
100%. And
yeah.
Because we know Iran did try to assassinate the president. One guy was just convicted of it, and the other guy's in Iran. So that's...
He was.
But I was just wondering, this statement here, because a lot of Jewish groups and others said you were really focusing it on Israel, and you're telling me, no, not at all. It could be any foreign country, correct?
In my statement, my letter of resignation, I say that the Israelis forced President Trump into this war.
No, I'm talking about this that you said on Carlson's show, when a president close to his advisors who's vocally advocating for us not to go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated. We're not allowed to ask questions about that. It's a data point. What's the data point?
The data point is that the investigation, in my view, especially the foreign ties, has not been complete. And that
well, why did you bring up the Israelis there? Are you talking about, what are you talking about there? Botswana? I mean, what are you thinking about when you say that? I'm just curious. Just asking questions.
Just asking questions. This guy mocking Candace Owens reveals how much he is obsessed with Candace Owens. I think these neocon half-men all get on the phone with each other like little teenage girls and watch Candace Owens obsessively. I think she lives rent-free in their minds.
That Charlie was advocating for us not to go to war with Iran and to rethink our relationship with the Israelis, and then he is killed. This needs to be looked into. That's all I can say.
That's all you can say. Rich, can you play what Charlie said after the president ordered the dropping of the bombs in June on those sites in Iran? Go ahead.
Now, what Mark Levin is going to do here is very dishonest and underhanded, and it's for scumbags. He's going to wear Charlie Kirk's ghost like a condom and screw you with it and then discard that condom because it's useless to him now. This is what they do. The neocons in the White House are wearing Charlie Kirk's ghost like a condom, and they're going to use it on you, and you're going to take it and enjoy it. See, here Charlie says he's got Trump's back and Trump has his back, which we see how that worked out. And Charlie had won against a lot of war lobbyists that they didn't do an Iranian full-scale invasion. So this is a victory lap for Charlie. So he's a good boy. And he's got Trump's back, Trump got his back, there we go. They're talking about Midnight Hammer. But Mark's presenting it like Charlie would support a full-scale invasion. And Mark knows he's lying, but Mark thinks you're stupid.
And you might say, Charlie, do you support or oppose this? I support President Trump. That's my answer. I know the man. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the man for the hour, and he's had the weight of the world on his shoulders. So in a situation like this, I support my friend, and he's had my back and I have his.
Hey, can we get Trump to cover Charlie's back with the investigation Joe Kent and Tulsi Gabbard was going after? Or, I don't know, maybe investigate some of the people in Tyler Robinson's orbit that posted before the assassination they knew it was happening? How about that? No? Don't got Charlie's back there? How about Charlie wanted the Epstein files opened up and indexed for all of us so they're easy to access? Did Charlie get his way there? We don't have his back there either? Oh, okay. This is still the campaign that's fighting the deep state, right?
That's my perspective. By the way, I also look at this and I say, and I understand the arguments of people that, don't intervene and all that. I get it. But boy, have we not exhausted so many diplomatic channels and options.
What do you think of that?
I didn't resign after Midnight Hammer. Midnight Hammer was a targeted operation that did not result in a further continuation of the war.
I'm not talking about why you resigned. I'm talking about, hold on.
Joe Kent was masterful, sticking to knowing that Charlie Kirk was talking about Midnight Hammer. Mark Levin tries to twist out of it, saying, I'm not talking. Mark Levin asked an open-ended question. How about that? So Joe Kent can say what he wants. So then Mark's like, I'm not talking about that. So it's ridiculous. And the interview goes downhill from here as Mark Levin loses control over it.
I'm talking about, that was Charlie's comment about the president ordering the bombing of those nuclear sites in Iran. Right?
Right.
And you were talking about,
I heard that
about Charlie being assassinated, right?
Right, he was against the regime change war that's taking place right now.
Okay, hold on. I'm not talking about
Midnight Hammer and the bombing was two completely different things. Targeted operations are completely different.
You were talking about the assassination,
as we've seen with the ramifications.
One of President's closest advisors, who's vocally advocating for us not to go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated. President Trump wasn't talking about hitting Iran again in September.
A ton of neocons, including Mark Levin himself, were insulting and criticizing Charlie Kirk over that. So it's very disingenuous what Mark does here. And again, he thinks you're stupid and can't look up what he was saying back then, especially what he was saying about Charlie Kirk.
They sprinkle these events with these American haters who claim to be American firsters and are fake MAGA.
Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are two of the hardest original Never Trumpers. You're looking at Never Trumpers telling us they're the new MAGA.
And even stabbed the president in the back.
This takes place a few days before Charlie's taken out. These guys are whining about Amfest and Tucker Carlson and people like that who brought up Mossad stuff and Epstein stuff. And, they don't want to hear that. They hate hearing that the head of Israeli intelligence was living in Epstein's house banging little girls.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an attempt by some of these organizations to, quote-unquote, maintain the big tent.
Ben Shapiro is directly attacking Charlie Kirk and TPUSA here. And he's about to say they allow a lot of clowns into the big tent.
But the reality is that, as many have said, the problem with a big tent is that you may end up with many, many clowns inside. And the most fundamental thing is that just because you're saying somebody votes Republican, that does not mean that they ought to be the preacher at the front of the church.
I'm not telling you guys how to run your synagogues. Don't tell us how to run our churches.
They're not the person who ought to be leading the movement if they are spending all day criticizing the president of the United States as covering up a Mossad ring or being a tool of the Israelis for hitting an Iranian nuclear facility.
We've watched a lot of people cover up the Mossad, ring, as he calls it, the Epstein files. And no one seriously believes President Trump just woke up and decided, hey, we got to go get Iran. The amount of lobbying done to President Trump it's undeniable. So you can say what he wants. It's ridiculous. The first round of strikes, Midnight Hammer, you literally had Laura Loomer chasing Charlie Kirk around, trying to undo all of his work when Charlie believed he was trying to stop a ground invasion of Iran.
We're talking about June.
We knew that after Midnight Hammer, it was evident that the Israelis still wanted regime change in Iran, and they were going to continue to push.
How did the Israelis get all this power over President Trump? He says to you, that's not right. Radcliffe says, that's not right.
Trust the CIA, bro. When did the Republican Party become, we trust the CIA? The CIA tells the whole truth. What is this?
Hegseth says, that's not right. I don't know what the vice president said to you, but why do you keep insisting on it when they keep insisting it's not true?
Because in real time over the course of the last year, we watched the Israelis through their official engagements with members of our government and the media echo chamber, which I believe you were a part of, move President Trump's red line from saying that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon to saying Iran can't have any enrichment, because President Trump and the former supreme leader of Iran agreed that Iran was not going to get a nuclear weapon. They were going to get
and you believed them.
Table.
You believe
so them? I believe the 18 members of the intelligence committee.
Well, apparently it wasn't 18 because the CIA director said you're wrong.
What Mark Levin says there is wrong because the CIA signed off on the assessment agreeing with Joe Kent. Period.
Well, the coordinated assessment that the CIA sent to the ODNI said that they were not working towards getting a nuclear bomb because the supreme leader had a prohibition on the development of nuclear weapons.
So you believed his fatwa?
So Mark Levin says, so you believe his fatwa to make Joe Kent look like an Islamist because Donald Trump and the CIA also were involved with the supreme leader on this agreement. But Mark Levin leaves those two out, and he is, of course, insulting the agency of President Trump in this moment. And he just says you believe the fatwa because he's being ridiculous. And this is what I mean, folks. This is fake wrestling. This is kayfabing. Mark Levin is wasting time now because he has already lost.
I mean, this is kind of foolish. So they put out a fatwa. The guy just lied about the distance. Hold on. The guy lied about the distance of their ballistic missiles in February. His foreign minister did.
Then why didn't Iran have a nuclear weapon? They've been trying. If they've been trying.
Then why didn't Iran have what?
2004. Why didn't they have a nuclear weapon? If Iran wanted,
why do you think they didn't have a nuclear weapon? Because we and the Israelis and perhaps other countries stopped them.
So now he's agreeing with Joe Kent. They had no weapons, and they weren't making weapons because we stopped them. In Mark's cartoonish mind, he doesn't explain how this happened because we're in a war because allegedly we didn't stop them or they kept going. They can't seem to get it straight.
With cyber warfare and other things.
With cyber warfare and other things, we use the Terminator. This is kayfabe. This is boomer talk.
I'm not even understanding your argument. Let's try it this way. Let's go back to basics.
No, we had no intelligence that said that Iran was working to develop a nuclear weapon. That information came from the Israelis, and then
it came from Witkoff, who directly said we were negotiating with the Iranians. That they told us.
Right. They were.
100% it came from Israel. If Levin wants to play the game, it came from Israel to Witkoff. Cool. Witkoff is a dumbass. His son invests billions in the Middle East. This conflict of interest has been brought up before. Everyone ignores it, acts like it's okay. Jared Kushner also investing in Gaza beachfront property. Totally ridiculous that these guys are the key points of contact over there. Steve Witkoff doesn't know what the Strait of Hormuz is. He called it the Gulf of Hormuz. The guy didn't know anything. And Mark Levin is ridiculous for pretending he does. It should be noted that Witkoff and Kushner were in talks with Iran back in, June. And, Israel struck the nuclear facilities in Iran, and that ended their talks. So literally we're negotiating with the guys, and Israel just bombs them. This demonstrates Steve Witkoff is merely a useful tool for Israel. A stuffed animal you wave at kids to smile for the camera. He's engages in talks with Iran and distracts them while Israel blows their stuff up. That's the value of Steve Witkoff on the world stage.
Hold on now. Hold on. I need the public to understand this.
There's no.
All right, you go first, then I'll go.
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and then through official engagements through the Israelis, and then also the media echo chamber that wanted regime change in Iran said no. We need to say that the Iranians can't.
What about the media echo chamber? Your buddies who didn't want regime change in Iran.
You cannot point to a random Middle East country without seeing somewhere that John Bolton, Lindsey Graham, and the entire gang of ferocious neoconservatives have messed up.
These are fanatical religious Nazis. I'm willing to risk them leaving. I think it will only get better.
Sounds good, right? That is such an immature, shallow, sloppy, irresponsible, insane, frenetic approach from a U.S. lawmaker. Oh, I know what happens when they remain. Actually, you don't know that, Lindsey Graham. The first rule of foreign policy is you must enter things with humility. That is the first rule. You don't know how things are going to work out, actually. You can predict them, you can have probability, you can look to history, but you don't know with certainty. And that kind of arrogance and that kind of pride is exactly why we got into the quagmire of Iraq and Afghanistan, and why Libya is still in a civil war, and why 600,000 people died in the Syrian civil war, resulting in 6 million refugees, largely remaking the polity and the entire demographic composition of Europe because we thought we knew. No, you don't know, actually.
There's a lot of echo chambers out there, wouldn't you say?
It appears that your media echo chamber was much more successful.
No, it
because now we're in
wasn't.
this
I
catastrophic
never
war
lobbied the
that the
president.
president's
Hey,
trying to
hey,
get
pay
out of.
attention to me. I never
I hear
lobbied
you.
the president. You guys keep putting that crap out there. I met with the president once at his request, and I said to the president, ready for this, Joe? I said, they're saying out there that I'm lobbying you. You know what he did? He laughed. You know what he said? Mark, I know where you stand. I watch your show on Saturday and Sunday. Anything I say here,
you can
pay
lobby
attention.
him.
Anything I say
you can
here
lobby him on your
is what
show.
I would say. I did what?
You can lobby him by using the power of your show, the power of your
Come on,
platform.
brother.
That's
You're
what I
not.
mean.
You're sounding almost ridiculous now. Now let's go on. I have a question.
There is nothing ridiculous. Mark is very disingenuous. This is very dishonest. He just bragged the president watches his show and knows where he stands, which has long been the kind of the secret of how you get to President Trump. Mark is just being a scumbag here. He just bragged about it. Now he's denying it, saying Joe Kent's ridiculous. Listen to Mark's words from 5 seconds ago.
Mark, I know where you stand. I watch your show on Saturday and Sunday.
Just gross. Totally dishonest.
There's been a big controversy now. Andrew COVID now. Media's covered it. Other people have covered it. He put out a video. He gave you text messages confidentially. Hold on, man. Let me just get the question out. You can dispute it.
Text messages to anybody.
But I have to explain it to the public if you wait. Hold on. So they got, what is it? Why don't you want to answer this? You won't even let me set up the question.
This was handled at the beginning of their so-called interview. You can go back and listen to it.
He said that he gave you text messages from Charlie Kirk, all this discussion about the Israelis and donors and so forth, that you called him and you said, make it public. He said, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. And then the next thing he knows, Candace Owens has it, and she makes it public, and she's off to the races, just like you and Tucker and the rest. Did that happen or not? Did you give it to Candace Owens, yes or no?
I did not give anything to Candace Owens, no.
Well, this is good to know. So you've never leaked. You didn't give anything to Candace Owens. I have a much higher regard for you now. That's the truth.
Okay.
I don't care for what you've done.
So even in this moment, Mark Levin admits the truth is all this leaking stuff is crap.
When you put that letter out, you knew it would do maximum damage to the president, didn't you? The timing, for instance, if you were going to resign because you didn't agree with this war, why didn't you resign when the war started?
Because I was hoping that we would immediately de-escalate and try and get back to the negotiating table.
We would start a war and de-escalate in 3 days?
I was hoping that we were
Where's
going
that
to do
ever
limited
happen?
strikes, and then limited strikes like we did in Midnight Hammer, and then back off and go back to the negotiating table. Once I realized that was not going to happen, and we were spiraling deeper into this, and we were starting to lose brave men and women in yet another Middle Eastern war driven by the Israeli agenda, that's what led me to
man, you
resign.
got a real hate on.
Duty to make it public.
You got a real hate on, brother. No, you
Mark,
do. Hold on, Joe. When I had you on my show, I read your texts. I read them out loud. And you've done a 180. Why is that? Because you had access to intelligence or something? Why have you changed completely?
I have not done a 180. I have no problem with us working with Israel. I have a problem with Israel driving our foreign policy in the Middle East as they have done to get us.
Do you have no respect for Donald Trump's agency, that he has the capacity to make these decisions himself?
Actually, all of us are really struggling with it. As an OG Trump staffer from December of 2015, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. The two guys, Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, who appear in this video, are never Trumpers. Big ones. And now they're like the leaders of MAGA. It's kind of ridiculous. With Susie Wiles pushing Trump around she has two generals around him all the time, bugging him in his ear. All these crazy people pushing him into these crazy decisions. The total opposite of what anyone wants. We do wonder about his agency. They start crying about the midterms and possible impeachment. Well, what the hell? We just wanted transparency. We wanted the stuff they campaigned on. Anti-war. Open up the files to everything. And now it's gone.
I have the utmost respect for the president. You can read my letter.
You didn't answer my
you
question. You don't sound like it.
I believe that he was influenced by the media echo chamber and by the Israelis.
Well, maybe he's influenced by your media echo chamber. Or maybe he's influenced by the Saudis and the Qatar. Who knows? He made a decision. Can't you accept the fact that he's a great president, that he took in all this information, he listened to all his advisors, and he made a decision? You may disagree with it, But why do you create a conspiratorial notion that Israel, 9.5 million people, a tiny economy and everything?
A tiny economy compared to what? They just had a confab in southern Florida where they're trying to invite all of banking in the world to Israel and be the #1 economic superpower. What's a tiny economy? Mark Levin attends these confabs. He's won awards at some of them. Here he is at one from a couple years ago, and listen to what he says about who Donald Trump listens to.
He does not want to lose on his watch. Period. He doesn't want to lose. And he's got a lot of people around him, but not just donors, people he listens to, lawyers, advisors, and so forth, who are Jewish or who are evangelical Christians. And he listens to them. Dragged powerful Donald Trump and the United States into war. Not one. You even have them dragging us into the Iraq war when on the record they said they didn't want to do the Iraq war. They opposed us doing it. Where'd you come up with that one?
More than one lie to unpack here. First of all, if Joe Kent would have said in his resignation letter the stuff Mark Levin just said about Jewish advisors Trump listens to, people would be screaming it's anti-Semitic, but it's just the truth, according to Mark Levin. Second of all, Ariel Sharon spoke out both sides of his mouth with other leaders of Israel about the Iraq war. They wanted us in there. And at different times, they said different things. So you can find on the record Israeli leaders from the early 2000s saying we shouldn't do Iraq. Then you can find them saying we should do Iraq, and it's very beneficial for them. So it's very disingenuous what Mark Levin is doing.
In this administration, I watched the Israeli media.
You were there 7 months.
7 months is plenty, but this is a lie.
The Israeli government. I watched that. I came in day one, and I worked as the DNI's chief of staff until I was confirmed. So
by the way, does Tulsi Gabbard agree with you?
You have to ask her. But what I did see is I saw the Israeli media echo chamber, and I'm not going to speak for Tulsi Gabbard. What I'm telling you is the red line.
You're speaking for the president. You said he was convinced by Israel.
No. Mark Levin said the president listens to his show, and the president's surrounded by Jewish advisors and evangelical Christian advisors who are, pro-Zionist. That's what that means. That's what Mark Levin said.
And he's got a lot of people around him, but not just donors, people he listens to, lawyers, advisors, and so forth, who are Jewish or who are evangelical Christians. And he listens to them.
No, I'm speaking for Joe Kent. That's why I resigned, so I could speak freely. I watched the.
By the way, that's very interesting.
No nukes to enrichment.
Go ahead.
What we watched, the red line move from no nukes to no enrichment. That basically short-circuited the ability for there to be a deal, leading us basically to a military conflict that was driven by Israel.
What does that mean? Slow down, Joe. What does that mean? No nukes to nuclear enrichment. What does that mean?
That's a great question. So President Trump has always said, and I think most people agree, that Iran can't get a nuclear bomb. Now, the former Supreme Leader agreed, and he had that fatwa in place. So that gave the Iranians
the fatwa meant crap.
To get to the negotiating
That's
table.
where you and I disagree. Guy has a fatwa in place. Slaughters 50,000 of his own people.
This is, again, a gross conflation. The fatwa in place for no nukes, while I don't trust the Iranian fatwa either, that's about the nuke stuff. People rebelling in the street, that has nothing to do with it. And why did our intelligence community watch all those people die? I don't understand. Why don't we just push into the war a few weeks earlier and save them all? These are the adult questions people need to ask themselves. Our leaders chose to watch those people die. It reeks of the intelligence stunts pulled around the Cuban Missile Crisis. They thought they were going to get something going. They failed. The people died, and they pretend it didn't happen. What little attention they give to those people's deaths is used as a propaganda tool to club you over the head if you're anti-war. They wear those people's ghosts like a condom to screw you with it, kind of like they do with Charlie Kirk's ghost.
It's not. Hey, Joe, he's a terrorist.
Mark, I believe the 18 intelligence agencies that said that Iran was not developing.
But guess what? The president agrees with his own conclusions. That is, that you're wrong.
Okay, well, let's go back to
Mr. Radcliffe believes you are wrong. The Secretary of Defense believes you're wrong. The Secretary of State believes you're wrong. And I can go right down the list.
Well, actually,
by the way, name the 18 intelligence agencies that agree with you, Joe. I don't even know what they are.
We don't have that much time, Mark. It's the intelligence community of the United States. Most people can look those up. There was unanimous agreement by the IC that Iran was not developing a nuclear weapon.
All right, I got to take a break. We'll come back. I'm going to let you finish, Joe. I'm going to let you finish. Hold your thought. I got to take a break. It's the nature of radio and TV and all the rest of it. So stick with me. Joe Kent, president said he decided to take these steps because the Iranians weren't negotiating in good faith. His envoys come back to him and say, they just told us they have all this nuclear material, and that they're not going to give it up, and they're not going to give it to a third party, and a number of other things, and you say it was Israel. Explain.
Many people involved in those negotiations say Steve Witkoff misrepresented stuff to say that, to push President Trump into war. That's just how it is. I don't know what went on in those talks, but Steve Witkoff believes in the Gulf of Hormuz.
The Israelis launched the attack, and we knew that the Iranians would counterattack. That is the only imminent attack was actually the Israelis launching the attack. So that's what got us into this.
That's been
this
denied, Joe.
We were in.
Hold on, Joe. The president of the United States said
that's okay.
He dragged the Israelis in.
Right. Initially, the Secretary of State, the Speaker of the House, Secretary of Defense, they all said that we had to attack because the Israelis were going to attack.
So they're all lying.
From my vantage point, that's what I saw as well.
They're all lying now, Joe?
What I saw.
Joe Kent is right. That's how it went down. Trump then did damage control. It's pretty easy. Here's Secretary Rubio backing up Joe Kent.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
What I saw was the Israelis driving us because they wanted the regime change war. They wanted to force our hand to make the Iranians, to attack Iran, to make the Iranians counterattack us so that we would be in the conflict.
I think you're extremely conspiratorial. I think that you're ignoring what all the other senior officials and the president have said. I really do. And I hope when you tell me you haven't leaked, because all these people in the White House say you have, that you're telling me the truth. I have no reason to disbelieve you. I hope when you tell me that you didn't leak those texts to Candace Owens, I hope you're telling me the truth. I hope when you're telling me 18 intelligence agencies all came together and said that the Iranians are not close to getting nukes, I hope you're telling me the truth. And also,
public testimony in Congress.
Yeah, well, we have public testimony in Congress from one of them, the CIA director, that says you're full of baloney.
DOD&I, who's responsible for representing the 18 intelligence, 18 agencies.
But he's the CIA. He's the big dog.
We're not.
Again, the CIA director is contradicting his own agency's, results. So, kind of ridiculous. Why are we supposed to trust the CIA? Trust the CIA is the slogan of 2028. Get real, man.
And I asked you what Gabbard, but I asked you Gabbard's attitude, and you said I have to interview her.
An agency contributed to the assessment.
Okay.
You asked me about her.
Who makes the final decision, Joe? Takes in all the information that the agencies put together. Who does that? You or the president?
The president does, but in this case, the Israelis decided to.
Did the intelligence agencies miss 9/11, or was that the Israelis too?
A hilarious cheap shot. But seeing that Mark Levin is never going to have the courage to get into the dancing Israelis, the fake moving companies, the Mossad spies who were spying on the 9/11 hijackers and told us that they were just watching what they were doing, the stock trades that were suspicious before 9/11, the Building 7 controversy, the guy who owned the World Trade Center and collected a mega insurance policy from it was only a few months old, that insurance policy. Mark is never going to have the courage to explore those questions. So, kind of gross he brought that up. Also, it's not that our intelligence agencies missed 9/11. John Brennan gave some of the hijackers their passports to get in.
Did the intelligence agencies miss Pearl Harbor, or was that the Israelis too?
I believe it was called the Mitchell Memo. Actually knew Pearl Harbor was coming. Pretty tough call. There's a lot of controversy around that as well. I don't know that the Mossad was involved because I don't think they existed then. But hey, you never know.
I'm really worried about you, brother. I really am. When you were first on my show, you seemed pretty straightforward and sane about this stuff.
I am pretty straightforward, and I don't think a foreign government should be allowed to dictate when we go to war. Or
I don't think they did. I think the president
right now,
makes a Joe. You're going to keep mentioning the Israelis. It's getting very boring and silly.
People he listens to, lawyers, advisors, and so forth, who are Jewish or who are evangelical Christians. And he listens to them.
The president made the decision. The president said he made the decision. The top brass. Do you think General Kane is a good general?
Yeah, he is a good general.
Do you think he's doing this because the Israelis want him to do it? How about CENTCOM General Cooper? Is he doing it? Is he in service? Is he in service to the Israelis too?
Neither of them were responsible for taking us off the war. The important thing is what took us off the war.
But they didn't resign in a public letter like you did either. Hey, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on. I really do. I wish you the best of luck. Well, folks, it's over. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you. I don't know what we learned, but have a wonderful night.
Here's what we learned. Joe Kent is not a leaker. There was no real investigation on Joe Kent for leaking. That was all a lie. All of our White House officials lied about it. It was never an official investigation. Pretty bad. Thank you for watching. Please smash that like button. Please like and subscribe.